Welcome to Generations at Work, where our goal is to build bridges and not walls between the different generations in the workplace. Today, we're exploring the vulnerabilities each generation feels at work. Before we dive in, if you're interested in leading multi-generational teams, or maybe you want a workshop or coaching for your leaders, we want you to visit maxwellleadership.com/generations at work. We would love to hear from you. We've also created some free downloadable assets and resources for you, Generations at Work playbook, and a lot of other valuable information. You can access that at maxwellleadership.com/generations at work. I'm your host, Susan Davis, and with us is our generational expert, Dr. Tim Elmore. Dr. Elmore, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Great to see you.
Well, we are great to see you. We are excited to have a guest here with us today. So, Tim, let's set this podcast up, because one of the things I hear all the times with teams is, and I'm going to call it a cuss word almost, it's this big V word, vulnerability, and everybody looks at this word as such a negative word. And I want to frame this podcast that we're not talking about weaknesses here. We're really inviting people in for a conversation, right, around what are some of the struggles and vulnerabilities, but how do we use this as a not a weakness, but also it's a strength. It's a strength where each person feels where this is a strength and not a weakness.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So when I did focus groups with all the different generations that show up at work, this is what I began to uncover, and it really led to this. Each generation based on their life station. Some are toward the end of their career, some are in the middle, some at the beginning. We felt like there's a sense of, gosh, I feel vulnerable to AI, or I feel vulnerable to being seen as a dinosaur or whatever, somewhere in between. So we just thought this would be so helpful, listeners, to actually have you hear from members of Gen Z, Gen Y, Gen X, and the boomers. So, Susan, I'm really looking forward to it, because if nothing else, it's going to make us more empathetic leaders when we understand the people around us.
Yeah, and I want our listeners to think about vulnerabilities as a superhero power.
Yeah,
I really do think people that are allowed to be vulnerable, it's a superhero power. So let's talk about what we mean by vulnerabilities. We don't mean flaws, we don't mean deficiencies, but maybe it's the fears, right, that people may not voice. Like, I don't want to speak up, I don't want to say something that's going to make me look silly or something. Or maybe it's an unspoken pressure they might carry. Or there's an assumption that someone thinks something about them or feel misunderstood. And I think the big word there is judgment. Anything else you think when we think about this word vulnerabilities?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the tension oftentimes is other people don't understand me. And it's not a whine anywhere, but it's just, I don't think they realize the pressure I'm under based on where I am. I'm trying to afford a home or whatever. And we don't bring it up because we got to just get the work done. But I think when we allow ourselves to be more human, and again, for leaders, if I just understand my people better, it doesn't mean I soften the goal or the objective. It just means I'm entering a little bit more compassionate, which makes people tend to lean into their leader. So I think this is all good. And this happens because, think about it, there's a rapid pace of change. We all agree things are changing pretty fast. I think sometimes people may be invited to the table, so to speak, as a team member, but they feel like you're going to talk over my voice at that table, and I don't want to be talked over. I want to be taken seriously. So anyway, I feel like now these conversations we're about to have with Gen Z, Gen Y, millennials, Gen Xers, and the boomers, if nothing else, it's going to make us better leaders. That's our goal.
And you've done a ton of research and a lot of focus groups around this. So how is this vulnerability showing up across these generations?
Yeah, well, I feel like I'm an older generation. I'll just say that right now out loud. I feel like I may be seen as irrelevant because my best days were in the past, not the future, maybe, or at least perceived that way. I don't think that's true, but other people look at me and go, well, we're going to pass that. Yeah, for the promotion, we're going to give it to somebody who's 30. So I think that's one. I feel like, too, I can forget how hard it was when I was in my 20s or my 30s. We always look at the good old days and, oh, those were great. No, they were hard for you too, buddy. That sort of thing. So I think that happens on both the young and the old. And this is just going to make us, work better, I think.
Very good. So for this episode, we and just so the listeners know, we're going to do 4 different episodes. We're going to interview someone from each of the 4 generations. And today we have our Gen Z guest that we're super excited to have with us. And we want to welcome everybody, the podcast world here at Generations at Work, for Josh Davis. And Josh is a Gen Z professional in the greater Atlanta area. He graduated from Georgia State University in May of 2024 with a bachelor's in business administration with marketing as a major. Josh, make sure I get this right, and a minor in English literature. And upon graduation, he became a business analyst with Deloitte Consulting in government and public service sector. So Josh works with not only state of Georgia, city of Tampa, now you're working with the state of Ohio in Medicare, Medicaid. Correct, Josh?
Yes, correct.
Perfect. So we're super excited to have you with us today, just to get your lens about the different vulnerabilities here from your lens of a Gen Zer. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited and honored to be here.
Yeah. Well, Josh, let me start the question. I'm sure you're aware, I think as most Gen Zs are, there's stereotypes, right? There's a lot of stereotypes on your generation. How do these stereotypes affect you as you show up at work?
I think that they affect how I want to present myself to my employers. Like, I think I'm very conscious of the perception that, maybe, he's all he cares about is his phone, he's always on social media. He's thinking about, image over everything. And so I try to show up very intentionally and purposefully and be as undistracted as possible. Try to combat some of the, maybe the ADHD stereotype with Gen Z, certainly. Is the one I'm kind of most conscious of.
Yeah, that makes sense.
One of the things that I have seen just at the groups that I work with is that people are afraid to say, I don't know. I don't know. They want to, like Tim said earlier, they want to feel like, hey, if I'm going to be invited to the table, I want people to feel I don't know. How do you feel about that? To say, I don't know, or I want to learn more. How does that show up for you? Yeah,
I think in my career, I've been fortunate to be in environments where learning is encouraged. But I think, you speak about vulnerabilities. I think this is my first professional environment. One of the biggest vulnerabilities I feel is what is my place here? How do I fit in, to this puzzle piece, and working for Deloitte and having served on, being on 3 different project teams. Every time I jump to a new project, it's that new challenge of I'm one of the youngest, if not the youngest. Where do I fit in? And what are kind of the team norms here? And is it okay to say, I don't know? And so that's a big vulnerability that I've had with every team I've been a part of. And I think that I don't know question, a lot of times I've been encouraged, if I don't know something, to go find the answer for myself. Is kind of the first response I get. Is if you don't know, well, you have our Microsoft Teams site with all of these old documents. Go find that answer and come back to us with what you think the answer might be, and we'll provide some clarity, some context for you. So a lot of the I don't know, which is definitely something that I feel joining the professional world. I've been in environments where I've been encouraged and often equipped to at least go attempt to find the answer first.
Yeah, that's good.
I love how you say that you're encouraged and equipped. And it just made me think of, because I always tell people, don't try to fake it. They'll say, oh, they say fake it till you make it. And I'm like, listen, they already know you don't know. So don't try to fake it till you make it, right? But what can employers do? I wrote this down when you just said this. You said, how do I fit in? What could the employers do out there to make that Gen Z fit in immediately so that they don't feel that stereotype, and it's okay to know that I don't know?
That's a great question. Thinking about my previous work experience, I know whenever I've joined a new team, usually a manager who might be a millennial or a Gen Xer will try to reach out to me one-on-one, and try to get to know me more at a personal level before we begin a professional relationship. I've been a part of teams that have done that and a part of teams that have not done that so far. And I think definitely where I've seen the most success and in terms of finding my place and understanding my role have been the projects where an older manager or, senior level team member reaches out and tries to form a personal connection and understand me, like understand who Joshua is, what makes Joshua tick, what makes Joshua excited about his work, and then finding what a role for me looks like on the team, knowing that going in.
Yeah. Josh, I have a quick question. It sounds like you're in a good place right now with Deloitte. Have you had to fight to feel like you belong? I mean, most new generations are going to feel that a little bit, it's just norm, but what have they done that's helped you feel like you belong? And or do you feel like you're still in a station where you're going, I still need to prove myself? What would you say?
Yeah, I think I've definitely had to fight to feel like I belong. Working for Deloitte, I think, comes with very high expectations. You're in professional services. We serve, state governments and city governments and, the federal government at times. And I think it's hard to find your place and find your niche in such like you're a small fish in a very big pond. And so I think some of the things that have been helpful have been, peers or mentors who have kind of seen me out there swimming and come alongside me and tried to equip me with more information. But a lot of the times the onus is on me. I need to kind of pick myself up from my bootstraps, if you will, and go out and learn something new. When I was working for the city of Tampa, like I had to take a lot of initiative to go research the city, the demographics, understand the surrounding area, having never been to Tampa before. And it's not something that's immediately just handed to me either. But I was so it's like a lot of times. But on my previous project, thankfully, I had somebody who kind of guided me and was like, encouraging me to find things out for myself.
That's good. And, I think there's this perception too, they've got to do it on their own. And I hear this a lot in some of the groups that I work with, that those Gen Zers, they just don't want to work. I hear it. I heard it last week with a group that I was with. And I'm like, no, I think they want to work. They just want to work differently. And I'll be honest, probably I'm a Gen Xer, and probably early in my career before I started working with Tim and Maxwell Leadership and doing what I do, I may have had some of those biases as well. I come from this mindset of a Gen Xer, just go out and figure it out, go out and get it done. So how are Gen Zers working differently? How are they working smarter? What are some of those things you can kind of fill us older folks in on?
Yeah. Well, I would say, I agree. I think, hard to speak broadly for an entire generation, but me and the folks I work with and my friends, we do want to work. But we also don't want work to be our entire life and our entire identity. I think that's something that I have seen myself bump up against at Deloitte a little bit, where the company culture is, you're on the road 5 days a week. You're working, like 8 to 7 sometimes. If that's what the client needs, then that is your number one priority. And I think people in my generation, we just don't desire for that to be our entire life. We seek out jobs that encourage and promote and provide for a stronger work-life balance. Because for me, like I view work as very important to me. And I care for it very much. But it's also because it is a means for me to provide for my family. I have a wife and I have a newborn baby. I have friends and a community that I want to be invested in. I have my weekly pickleball game, and I have my church, and I have, all these other things that I care about, my own hobbies. And so I want my work to be something that represents me well and that I push for, but I also don't want my work to stand in the way of me spending time with my wife, my family, my child, my community. And so I think wherever I can find a work-life balance, I seek that out. And then also, speaking of working differently, I think, Gen Z, we came up with technology. A lot of us had smartphones in our hands from a very young age, have been on social media since we were, in our preteens, if not younger. I know I got my Instagram account when I was 13, and friends who had been on Instagram for years before then. So I grew up so comfortable with technology and being so interconnected, as we were talking about a little bit before the podcast, that it's almost, I have such a high value on those interpersonal connections, spending time with my family and friends outside of work, because I just have been so inundated with technology. and also I'm very comfortable with technology, and so I feel like I, am equipped to do that well. But so those are the two things that kind of come to mind. I think strong work-life balance and a high value on things outside of work being the interpersonal relationships.
But that doesn't make you less of a worker. That's what I'm hearing you say too. You're all in during those hours that you need to be there.
Oh yeah.
But
Absolutely.
I've heard so many from your generation, Josh, say, I've watched the extremes though from older generations that their work was everything and it kind of ruined our family, or it ruined Christmas or whatever. And you're going, oh, I don't want that.
Especially having a family of my own. Like I know there were seasons growing up where my dad was traveling on the road 5 days a week for his job, and he provided for our family very well. I'm very grateful for him. But like if I can help it, like not wanting my work to be the thing that takes me away from my family and my friends, especially with a child now, like very important to me. And if that is what happened, I would understand, but I have a very high value of that not being the case, I guess. And I've even seen older managers and senior managers and partners at Deloitte who, speaking to them about their experience, that was their life for so long, was, the client comes first and, 7 days a week on the road sometimes, if that's what it took. Wow. And I appreciate that. I respect how hard that you worked and how much that meant to you. And it means, I think, the same to me. But I also know how much I want to try to preserve that balance to the best of my ability.
Makes sense.
I think there is a really opportunity right here, what he's saying. And from your research and your experience, how do we get our leaders, current leaders and managers in workplace and corporate environments to understand this from Gen Z, so that when they're there, we get the most from this generation, instead of having this conversation all the time if they just don't want to work, because that's not the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, if I can just tell you what I'm hearing, Josh, I so appreciate your perspective. I'm not hearing you say, I don't want to work. I'm hearing you say, I want to be healthy so I can last longer, in my career and in my personal journey. So I feel like what Gen Z brings is enough of a view of what happened if it wasn't healthy to older generations, and saying, I'd like to right size that. Would that be a fair assessment of maybe the vulnerability you feel of, I don't want to go crazy like that? I think
so. Yeah, I think so. I think I've seen what, people at my company and like the way that they've done things before, and I respect that, but that isn't what I want for myself. And I think that is a vulnerability. I feel is like not letting that become my entire identity. But
right. Before I jump in with some of my research, one last time, Josh, any other vulnerabilities that might be helpful for someone, let's say 40 and over, that's listening right now? Just a vulnerability that you might feel as a young 20-something.
Something that came to mind as I was thinking through this was office culture. I go into the office about once a month. That's the kind of Deloitte standard. But I think being so comfortable online growing up, I graduated high school in 2020. So I did a semester of high school and a few semesters of college fully online, fully remote. I'm so comfortable with technology. I think I understand it so well that I feel that I can be as productive, if not more, when I'm working from home. But seeing a lot of like return to work culture, I think there's a lot of positive things to be said about working collaboratively together as a team. When I've traveled to Ohio, I know I've had some very productive time with my team there. But I think finding that balance between, work from home and what that allows versus like the expectation of office culture is a real vulnerability that I feel.
No doubt about it. And that totally makes sense to me, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me share some of the stuff I've uncovered, and then Susan and Josh both, I'd like you to weigh in before we sign off here on this conversation. So as I met in focus groups with young professionals, as well as university students, obviously Gen Z is getting their sea legs at work, just like we all did back in the day. So you do feel a little vulnerable of, am I going to be taken seriously? Am I going to make it here? I mean, Josh, you must have had that feeling. Am I going to last here?
Definitely.
So I do a couple of 2 or 3 thoughts here. Millions of Gen Zers are waiting for the shoe to drop on this AI thing. Like, will my job be jeopardized if not by AI, by someone who knows how to use AI really well, better than me, maybe, So
Yeah.
you must be feeling that. I'll let you talk in just a second. But yeah, that entry level job, maybe it's not going to work out after all if I'm a sophomore in college and I'm now having to feel like I got to change my major because everything I had planned is now a little bit off the table. I also found, predictably, that mental health was a vulnerability that many Gen Zers feel. Josh, I feel like you're coming across like you have a pretty good sense of you're healthy mentally, but your peers, they come in with a little angst of, gosh, Susan and I have talked before about bathroom camping. It's a term that Gen Z has brought where they go into a stall in the bathroom and just stay there for a while just to decompress from the pressure of work. And of course, a 60-year-old would go, "What are you doing there, Bob?" But there's that feeling of this is so different than the classroom.
Yeah.
So huge issue. Mental health is a huge issue. And I feel like that when I meet bosses that understand it's a real thing, mental health, that is, then Gen Zers tend to lean in as well. In other words, if I show you I do care about your personal well-being, not just you as a worker, but as a human, you tend to want to lean in and say, good, thanks. I just needed you to know what I feel. Yeah. So, and then the last thing I would share real quick, guys, is Generation Z can also feel vulnerable regarding work expectations versus reality. Josh, I got the feeling just listening to you, you had some very realistic expectations, but oftentimes Gen Z has been fed by either mom and dad that said they were awesome, for whatever they did, and then of course mama wants them to get that 6-digit figure, a salary right away. And sometimes the expectation doesn't match what the company can do. Now you're at a great institution at Deloitte, but a small company may not have the money that the expectation is. So this can increase burnout levels when it wasn't what I thought it would be. And I just, it tends to work against me staying on the job. So I'll stop there. I'd love, Josh, for you to maybe give anything. Yeah, I feel that too, or I see that, or maybe not.
No, on the AI point, completely agree. I've had that fear as well, and been like reading all the company emails about AI as closely as I can to try to understand that situation. I was fortunate to have a professor at Georgia State who was really encouraging us and pushing us to use AI and gain an understanding of it as it was coming up while I was in undergrad. But that is a real fear and vulnerability that I have. And I think speaking to people who are a few years younger than me, who are in college now, or even in high school, what is the professional world going to look like when I'm older if artificial intelligence is doing so much of the work? And so I think I felt a lot of pressure on myself, being like, wanting to maintain a professional career and doing these things like, how can I understand AI? But it is a real fear that I have of like, I want to understand this and I want to be the person who can handle it well. But what is that going to do ultimately the better I understand it? So that's a real tricky one that I haven't fully sorted out in my own self yet.
That's right. Join the club. Yeah, that's right.
Thank you. And on the mental health point, sorry, were you going to continue about AI?
No, you go ahead.
I say on the mental health point, I have bathroom camped on a few occasions. I cannot lie. Because I think I just, sometimes, especially when I'm in office, I think sometimes maybe I'm a little bit too used to, the way I'll work from home works, where I can take a 15-minute breather if I need to. I can, go walk around outside. Bathroom camping is definitely for me necessary. It kind of re-energizes me to keep me going through the day because being on all day long in the office, if I'm in Ohio for the week, or it can get really frustrating and exhausting. And so I completely understand. I think it's nice to have just that little mental health break to kind of reset myself.
That makes sense. I'm so glad you said that, because it's not that you're a wimp. You're just kind of being reset so you can be better when you get back to the workstation. Yeah.
I agree. I think
it should be okay. Yeah. It shouldn't be something you have to worry about.
Yeah. No, I think so. And I think fighting that expectation of being here, always being on. I just don't know if I don't think that's how I work well. I don't think that's how a lot of people work well. And I think that, understanding and again, I've been in situations at previous jobs and at this job where that's been, more accepted or less accepted. But
Yes.
I think understanding like it's not that I don't want to work. It's not that I'm wimping out. It's that I want to be better. Ultimately, I just need a second to reset.
That's right.
Working
Makes sense.
different, working
Mm-hmm.
differently. Josh,
Yeah.
any words of wisdom for employers out there? Listen, if anybody thinks that they just can disregard this topic, they're snowing themselves, right, Tim?
Yeah.
I mean, Gen Z is, and the more I learn from you, Tim, the more I learn from our guests. This generation have so much hope in. They can
Yeah.
change so much for us, but
Yeah.
we have to lean in and lead them the way they want to be led. So, Josh, any words of wisdom for any employers that might be listening out there to say, "Hey, this is the best way to lead me"?
That's a really good question. I think, I mean, Dr. Elmore, you talked about, leading with empathy. I think, understanding, from a Gen Z perspective, I think we were kids during the market crash in '08. We were still coming of age during the pandemic in 2020 and 2021. Our world, and then with all the access we have to all kinds of information, like I think we're one of the most aware generations of everything that's gone on in the world. We've had multiple events that have kind of rocked our generation. I was born 2 weeks before 9/11.
Wow.
Like it's so we've lived in just such an uncertain world, and that's led to a lot of anxiety. It's led to a lot of mental health things because we're just so aware, and we're in a world with so much uncertainty. So I think understanding that the world we've been shaped by is different than the world that Gen X and even millennials to an extent was shaped by, and understanding that a lot of times what we want is community and is just some form of certainty, I think, and something more tangible to hold on to. Are two things that I would, I guess, encourage people to lean in and understand, and having empathy for those things, like those desires, and then also taking into account the technology and all the things that have shaped me and my generation, and understanding that I don't think that we work worse. I think we work differently, because we've just been shaped by a very different world than what it was 20 years ago, and I think that there's a lot of strengths there. But
Yeah, that's good. Makes total sense.
Our goal is to build bridges, not walls, right? Josh, you've been such a good guest here for us today. Tim, any last thoughts, questions as people can, and I would be amiss, our listeners, if you have not read Tim's newest book, The Future Begins with Z, it's the Bible. Like, you want to go learn how to work with Gen Z, get this book. You can get that book. And also, Tim, you provided so many value added resources at thefuturebeginswithz.com. But any last words, anything that you'd like to add?
No, Josh, I've so appreciated these are words that I've come to realize are true, but hearing them straight from you, someone who longs to be a great employee and maybe one day a supervisor or manager. But it's just, I probably will need to go about it a little differently. Having been raised in the 21st century makes complete sense. So thank you for joining us today, Josh. It's been a privilege.
thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. And we appreciate all of you out there listening or watching wherever you get your podcast. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Tim. Again, if you are interested in leading multi-generational teams, maybe you need a workshop or maybe you need coaching for your leaders, visit us at maxwellleadership.com/generations at work. You can also visit for Tim's news book, The Future Begins with Z.com. Both of these places will give you a ton of free resources, value added to help you as you lead this next generation. Thank you for being here, and we will see you on the next podcast.